Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Key Biscayne Monument Sign Workshop. We are holding this workshop to address some of our zoning signage issues that have arisen in the last couple of months to make sure that we have lively community input. I know that many people have reached out to us independently to express their views, their concerns, and their priorities. And so we're having this forum to make sure that everyone has a voice. With that, I would like to open this up to public comment. Our first speaker is Theo Holloway.
Hey everyone, Theodore Holloway. Do I give my address? Is that 575
Past
Brandon?
council member.
Yes, past council member. But we're missing a clerk, aren't we? So I'm here because I wanted to share my opinion. And I think that when you look around other communities that are as nice as Key Biscayne, probably one of the first things that doesn't come to mind is a sign. You know, having done research in terms of what went into incorporation and what went into the village, one of the things that actually came up when I was running was signage. And the pole signs, you know, there was a big initiative to remove them. And then subsequently there was, and is, an ordinance to remove signs. All of the signs technically are currently out of compliance because in 2015, as I'm sure you know, they sunsetted, but they did not get taken down. So, you know, I was hoping to have some visual aids for you in terms of if we are going to allow for signs or sustaining the signs that we do have, to give you a visual representation of what that looks like, because as someone who walks Crandon at least once a day, perhaps 2 or 3 times, I can tell you that our signs are in some cases already too big. And I know that there's concern around cars and vehicles being able to read them. However, I think that what we've aligned ourselves towards is vehicles. And as we've made initiatives to try to reduce traffic, whether it be through Key Ride or through Lime Bike, we are moving in the direction of being more pedestrian friendly to alleviate traffic, which subsequently will slow cars down. Although we have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, technically, you know, when you're stuck in traffic, you're moving 0. So while you may hear a presentation today about how we need to accommodate certain speeds, I think it's important to think about the context of what we're aiming towards and whether or not, in addition, mobile devices and the ability to pull up a map and see where you are relative to whatever your destination might be is allowing us to not necessarily rely on visual aids in the same fashion that we did maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Theo.
Theo, I welcome any kind of demonstrative aids or pictures that you want to circulate at some point. Our next speaker is Mike Davey.
Mike Davey, 50 Ocean Lane Drive. Full disclosure, I am a tenant at 240 Crandon. I am also on the board of my condominium, but I will be speaking exclusively to the commercial signs. Signs are important landmarks. I know Theo believes that in the future we're going to be able to get away from them, but as of right now, we need to be able to tell people where we are, particularly as businesses. I've had numerous occasions on which I've had people call me and saying, "Where's your building?" And I would say 240 Crandon. And they would say, "Oh, is that the square? Because that's where I am." I'd say, "No, you have to turn around and come back." So monument signs do serve a practical purpose, and right now we need them. The current state of signs, as Theo said, is not in keeping with the character of the Key, nor is it what we want the Key to look like. We've got the T-Mobile sign over there that is horrendous. We've got signs that are just, all of the signs are out of compliance since 2015. We need to bring everything back into compliance, and I think that that's easily done. We should, first of all, one of the issues, I know you're talking about monument signs for everything. I think what you need to address first, the most important thing to address is the commercial. zone. I don't think you want to tackle the condominiums at the same time you're trying to tackle commercial. So I would suggest that you go after the commercial first, then you start dealing with the condominiums if you feel there need to be changes in those areas. But we should have a uniform standard. All the plazas should have the same style of sign. They should use the same font, they should use the same colors, and they should use the same size. We should have standards. I know we used to have standards as to what, I think it was Helvetica or something, and I'm not sure what the color was, and I'm not sure what the size was, but we need to do that. I know people are saying the signs are too big. Reduce them a little bit. Just make it so that something is identifiable for the building. I would suggest that the signs contain the address number, maybe the name of the street, and we all know it's all Crandon, and then the name of the plaza or building. And the name of the plaza or building could be left up to said plaza or building. If the Winn-Dixie Plaza wants to name itself as the Winn-Dixie Plaza, that's well and fine. But we don't want a list of all of the businesses that are in those plazas. We just want something that distinguishes so that it is a landmark so that you can find what you're looking for. That's what we're trying to do with monument signs. They do work for that purpose. And that's really it. Let's be practical, but I do think we need monument signs. I think what we have now is not in fitting with the character of the key. I think we do want some more uniformity. You can do that here. I think it's very simple to legislate, but let's get it done, and let's give understanding to our business owners and our property owners so that they understand what they're supposed to be doing and they can operate under active law. So thank you very much. Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
evening.
Thank you, Mike.
Our next speaker is Mario Garcia Serra.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Mario Garcia Serra, with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue and my residence at 600 Grape Tree Drive. I'm here tonight representing 240 Crandon Investments, LLC, joined by Jorge Barbanten of 240 Crandon also. You know, we were part of the initiation of this discussion, the origins of this discussion about a year ago when we were realizing that a monument sign might be appropriate for 240 Crandon. Since then, we've been able to realize that the existing situation is not a good one. We have a code which is not being enforced, which if it was to be enforced, your own staff describes it as a hardship on the existing building and property owners that do have monument signs. The ensuing conversation has been about how to balance the needs of those businesses to have some exposure and presence on Crandon Boulevard with the aesthetics of the community which need to be protected and ensured. I think we're getting closer to a consensus, but the remaining challenge is really visualizing what sort of monument sign would be acceptable, good enough to provide that presence on Crandon Boulevard that some of the business owners need, at the same time improving the aesthetic that we have right now in the village of Key Biscayne. I myself had a bit of a common sense practical revelation over the weekend when realizing that every day we drive in and out of Key Biscayne, and the first sign that we see driving in is a very large monument sign installed by the village of Key Biscayne welcoming you to the village of Key Biscayne. And you look at that sign and you realize that's a tasteful sign. You know, of course, the size is appropriate considering that it's a welcome sign coming into the village. And it occurred to me, perhaps would some subset, some smaller size version of that sign, which is nicely clad in natural stone, be the answer? In other words, something that really identifies Key Biscayne as soon as you drive in and continues to identify Key Biscayne as you drive down Crandon Boulevard and providing the wayfinding. That not only do some residents perhaps still need to find their way around the village of Key Biscayne, but keep in mind the businesses to a great extent have to rely also on off-key business. You know, the many people that we have coming in here on the weekends to enjoy the parks and so forth in order to maintain themselves and provide the services that we all have become accustomed to here in the village. Your staff has prepared a recommendation that we're generally supportive of. It actually is probably more permissive than the sort of proposed code amendment that I had circulated over the last year. I would personally perhaps reduce the size of monument signs that are being proposed and reduce perhaps where they could be located. I think really monument signs are justified for the larger properties that have more frontage on Crandon. Not necessarily every property along Crandon Boulevard should be entitled to a monument sign. With that said, I think it's time to just get this matter moving, start putting ink to paper, have an ordinance that we can really at least start commenting on and start circulating and figuring out what to do, because this issue sort of fell off the radar screen probably about 6 or 7 years ago. We shouldn't let it fall off the radar screen again this time. We should try to figure it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cindy Mies.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Mies. I live at 441 Harbor Drive here on Key Biscayne. I'm speaking as the senior warden for St. Christopher's by the Sea Episcopalian Church. We are so out of compliance with absolutely everything. Our sign has been there, sitting right on the public right of way, pardon me, really big, not lighted, since before incorporation. We'll be celebrating our 60th anniversary this year and 50th anniversary of the school. So I ask you, if you're going to make changes, please keep in mind the history, the legacy of our houses of worship. We would really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Betty Conroy.
Good evening. I'm Betty Conroy, 785 Crandon Boulevard. I was so concerned about this issue, I got together about 8 people about a week ago just to have a small group to discuss this issue in depth. And Mike Davey really summarized. He came up with a summary of what we concluded. I'm going to repeat it a little bit. First of all, there's so much technology now that I feel we have to consider the technology that people have, the iPhones that direct them generally to the building. And again, the idea of having the sign with the name of the shopping center, the number, but not going into every business that's in the shopping center. We also decided that rather than trying to tackle the whole village, which, as you can see already, there's going to be lots of different problems, that I think you all would be wise to start with the commercial district. Then you have a smaller group to address, because it is going to be, you are going to run into problems. But our group felt it's just like living in a condo, that there are certain rules, and once we set these rules, the businesses will have to comply. They may not like it, and as you can see, we have no compliance now. So we don't want that to happen again. I think it's really important that once we agree, we need to have compliance. And I know that there will be some costs involved, and one subject that came up was perhaps the village assisting, and I'm not going to get into that, but it is a thought to help some of these businesses if it becomes a really serious financial burden. All the plazas should have the same style, if we do keep the monument sign, as to size, font, and color. And it should be modernized in terms of font and color. The sign should contain the address and the name of the plaza building. The plaza buildings can determine for themselves what to name themselves. I think the idea is to keep it simple. And I love the way the staff did show you pictures from other towns, because when you go into some of these other towns, you just have a feeling, you have a sense. You have that here, right now, I don't think we have that sense. I think it's just kind of a mess. So we want to create the feeling of a village, the feeling that we all have, and one reason we love living here. And I think the signage is that important. I also do disagree with the recommendation for size. I think if we could keep it down to perhaps 12 feet, something in that category, I think it would be a lot better. I am not good at visualizing, so we're hoping some more visual aids are going to come. But today I had the idea that maybe we could put some signs out there at these different sizes, and then you could actually see what they look like and get an idea of what it would look like if we did enforce that size. So I was hoping to have this room full of people, but didn't happen. But at any rate, you know that we do care, and we do really think it's really important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty.
Can I ask one question?
Sure, Betty.
I meant to ask Mike when he was the consensus out of the group the other night to permit monument signs at every single property, commercial property on Crandon?
My feeling, I mean, how are you going to discriminate against certain?
That's the wrong word to use, first of all.
Not if I'm the attorney representing that plaza. How are you gonna say one plaza can do it and one can't? One commercial property can do it and one can't?
Well, there is a theory, but I didn't mean to get into a debate about the theory. There is a police power predicate that we've discussed in passing, at least, so far. But I just was really asking the question, not meaning to engage in the debate.
It was a yes or no question.
Well, we didn't discuss that, so I guess my
Well, I
answer.
think we did discuss it, now that I recall.
Oh, okay, we did discuss it.
See?
You may have not had a meeting of the minds.
Right.
You guys had a
I
consensus.
think our discussion was, you know, I understood that there was somebody propounded that maybe we would, as you said, under police powers, which always makes me nervous, they were going to propound that some could have a certain sign and some wouldn't have a certain sign. I don't know if I'm necessarily in favor of something like that, but.
I think you spoke to it, but I'm really wondering about if there was a consensus. And police power, of course, is a term of art.
Yeah.
This is, you know, Mario made the point about frontage as one criteria, or another criteria, for example, is if a property like 240 is actually parallel, as opposed to perpendicular or angled, and therefore not quite so visible, particularly as the road bends.
But then you're getting into that subjective sort of, well, this, unless you do frontage or something that is defined, that's black and white, you're into, well, is this building seeable? You know, you've got the Key Executive Building, the old Greasy Building. Is that not enough frontage? Should they not get a sign? But you have the Wells Fargo there that's.
So the
Not
subjectivity is a thing.
Inappropriate sign.
But I guess what I want to get to is that I would be correct in considering that it was we discussed it but didn't come to consensus.
That is what occurred.
Yeah,
Okay.
I noticed that some other cities do it that way, considering the frontage.
Yeah.
But I don't remember a real consensus on it.
Yeah, I think that's my memory too. There was a woman there that I didn't know from Coral Gables who spoke to this. And maybe you remember the woman that was sitting across from where I was sitting.
From Coral Gables?
She went from Coral Gables. I thought she lived in.
Arietta?
Yeah.
No, Arietta lives out here.
Who's out here?
Yeah,
Okay, I got it. I'm thank you.
okay.
Our next speaker is Robert Disoglo.
Hi, Robert Dusoglu, 785 Glenridge Road. I am, as you know, very involved with the chamber, and we've been having a great deal of discussion regarding the sign ordinance. Back about 22 years ago, there was quite a rigid sign ordinance that was passed that all the businesses had to conform to. We had to have backlit channel signs. They could only take up X amount of space. Also, the wood ones that hang over the businesses had to be a specific sign with specific paint. I think now, looking back, you can see the benefit that those restrictions were put in, because as you go through every mall, it's really quite nice looking. You don't have different colors, different sizes, different this. You know, it doesn't look like a hodgepodge in some of the other neighborhoods that you may visit. I think that the monument sign issue is a great opportunity that you can put into line the same thing that happened for the storefronts, and the great job that the village did for that. So I don't think that this is a problem. I think it's more of an opportunity. Regarding the businesses, we all discussed in the advocacy committee that we wouldn't mind having those type of restrictions as far as the monument signs that would have some sort of conformity, and that it would have some a certain appeal or a certain look, a certain architectural aspect that we would conform to regarding the village. So that's not something that we would interfere. We do want each property represented and represented and have the opportunity to be able to put their sign. But we do, as on behalf of the chamber, we would like that to be some sort of consistency and something that architecturally would be pleasing for for the village and overall, which I don't think is something that you might have expected to hear from us, but that's what the committee seems to have come up with. So I just wanted to say those few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But every commercial property in Crandon.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's only 10 signs left. There's only 10 signs left. It's the condos, which I think you have another 26. The report, by the way, prepared by the village is excellent. It really gives us a good idea. But the condos is another 26 signs, I think, that is concerned. So that have not been placed. Just you look at the report, right? So I think there's only 10 commercial properties that do not have. But if you put in the right zoning and the right rules, I don't think it's going to be a problem at all, you know?
Right, I think that, can I just?
Come to the podium, please.
Yeah, and as you see, the thing that not bothers, but that looks awkward is where you have the T-Mobile sign. That's something that's awkward compared to the rest of the thing that's happening in the village. Not what, if Baptist can put a sign or not, so.
Thanks, sorry. No, I just want to jump in because I think to your point, your concern is if you're looking at it, and then I may be wrong, but you're looking at it as if we're going to have T-Mobiles at every site. But I think what you can do as this body is you can control the size of the sign, you can control the design of the sign. So it may just be a number and a name for every one of them. So it's not this huge imposing monument sign. You can reduce the size of it, but just something's got to mark these properties. Because I think the key executive, I don't have a business there, but I'm thinking if my business was back there, you would have difficulty again because you need to figure out how to get in there. And if you're not familiar with the business, you're not familiar with the site.
I have a business there. Yeah. No problem whatsoever.
You
with
walk.
people finding me. Period. I need to refute that.
Okay, but I'm suggesting
I have a business there and no problem people finding me.
you have, you have a bright clientele. I don't know what to tell you. That's great.
We're a
Not that
bright
I don't.
community,
My clients are
Michael.
all awesome.
Michael, we're the most highly educated community
But
in
my point is,
the Southeast
I
United
understand
States.
what people miss. I'm just telling you anecdotally, he may not have an issue with clients missing. I have it. I mean, I have it it's not just one, it's not two, and it's people actually who live on the Key. So we're not talking about, I've had people at the Key Colony Plaza say, are you in the Key Colony? But no, I'm 240. Where's the 240? I just think it's a.
But if the predicate is.
You're right.
Is location, is assisting someone to find.
That's what it is. It's
So the
landmarks.
devil's advocate response is this, and I'll use the Galleria as an example. It's set back from the street.
Right.
It's highly visible, and it says in big letters, Galleria. Does that property need a monument sign for people to find the Galleria?
I would argue that it's their option. They may not want, we're not forcing it on people. If a Galleria doesn't want one.
But if the regulatory predicate is helping people to find places.
Correct.
That doesn't fit the predicate, does it?
Well, certainly it does. If they believe it's a business need to have a sign out there to do that, then yes, that's a private property sort of issue. That's not, what we're trying to do is regulate how much businesses can do, how much property owners can do with their property. Whether or not they choose to do that is a different story. And I don't think we should be deciding, well, this property, because of its design, shouldn't have the same right as another property that has a different design.
But
that's not the government's purview.
If the government's purview includes the regulating the aesthetics, but seeking to accommodate the practical desire to be able to find merchants and retailers and the like, service providers, and to use, again, the Galleria, not to pick on them, but for purposes of the hypothetical, if the location and nature of the property and the existing signage makes it obvious that that's the Galleria, the justification fails.
No, but I think you've got it flipped. I think the right of the business owner to want to bring people in, the right of these people to mark where they are, to establish something that, we're 240, we're 250, we're 260, is different. Our right to regulate our right to regulate aesthetics shouldn't dominate somebody's right as far as being a private property owner to have some markage.
But they have markage, and of course, this is a debate that's going to come, not to get lost in it, but there is a debate on this point.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between wayfinding and and the other is income generating at the same time. If they already know and they already have a way there, is it the businesses just want to have one business up there that can pay a monthly fee for them and just to have it on, just to have it?
Is it marketing and right? Is it
In
marketing
fact, in the
versus-
case of the Galleria, every single tenant is visible from Crandon easily because of the design of the property. And
That's-
where it's set
that's
back
true.
from the street.
And Allison, you want to
I
add to
just
that?
had an observation. It seems like we have a lot of issue with specifically 240 Crandon. And I think the way that the driveways are laid out between Key Colony Plaza, 240 Crandon, Key Colony across the street, and the way the island is in the middle of Crandon right there, I would suggest that part of what makes it so difficult to find your building is the landscaping. That your building is one of the only ones with the hedge straight up at the road, at the sidewalk, the way that it is. It's a very tall hedge. It makes the driveway feel very narrow and hard to sort of find. You pass one and immediately the next one's there, but you didn't see it coming because there was a tall perpendicular hedgerow as well. As you come between 240 and Key Colony Plaza, there's a hedge.
There are a couple of tall trees.
Trees, yeah.
There are a
there's
couple of
trees.
very tall trees
What's
that
beautification? I mean,
But
almost create a wall.
Right.
yeah,
They create a wall.
I think that maybe looking at that may also help to find that building. If
But
it's
you still need something to mark, I mean, I'm just saying, there needs to
not,
be some
I'm not
marker.
saying that there's no need for a sign. Or
I know what you're
there is a
saying.
need for a sign, but
yeah, I think the
it strikes me
combination.
that this one building has a harder time than others, and that is the thing that makes it different.
And you know, you guys actually have pretty good signage on the building. The only thing is you don't see it because it's blocked by those trees until you pass it.
I don't even know if, do we have any exterior, is there exterior?
Yeah, they do.
This is baptism.
So that, I
We
mean,
passed a
PDG
variance
is
to
right.
allow them.
we
to
did,
have it.
yes.
Don't you work
And
there?
that may be contributing.
You can't see it.
I know how to get there, so I
The
don't.
hedges are in your eyes.
So you really, the signage, it's really prominent. You see, if you're coming from the south to the north,
Right.
incredibly easy to spot. If you're coming from the north to the south, because of that kind of wall of trees, you see the signage on the building once you've passed the driveway.
Yeah, I
So that
honestly
may
haven't
be,
even
I
noticed.
mean, thank you, Allison, because I thought that was an excellent point. And we all, I mean, we understand, but there are many solutions to problems. Thank you.
I think we're sort of losing our way here, which we sometimes do. I don't think it's our mission to try to determine intent or need as far as whether someone needs a monument sign or what their intention is of having one. I think it's our job to hear from our constituents, decide what we can do to regulate it, and then do our job. I don't think, personally, I don't even notice monument signs. If you want a personal reflection here, we're not a little sleepy beach town anymore. Crandon Boulevard is not pretty anymore. It has a lot of not very attractive buildings on it that didn't exist. It's got shopping centers that didn't exist. It's got lots of businesses that need to be found. Chief Press said a few meetings ago, we have more than 1 million people pass through Crandon Boulevard every year. They don't live here. They don't know what the businesses are here. And I would assume that a fair number of them probably shop here, probably eat here, and probably don't know where places are. So this isn't for us. It's not for the residents that live here. It's for the people that don't, that need to find places. And not everybody's got a 2018 car with a state-of-the-art GPS in it. Maybe someday they will. I think that most of what used to be on Crandon Boulevard when we go back 30 years doesn't even exist anymore. And I think that most of what's here now didn't exist back then. And I think we have to realize where we are and why we need some way of businesses being able to identify themselves and then come up with a rational, sane way to design these informational signs so that they are not obstructive, they're not objectionable. But I got to tell you, when you put a small sign out there, if it's tastefully done and if they're uniform, and it's sitting next to a 3-story ugly building, who notices the sign? You see the building. we're already built up. We've already got eyesores. You can't do anything about it. So why don't we listen to the people that are telling us why signs are important and then do our job and try to make them as attractive and informational and useful and regulated as we possibly can, instead of debating, does someone need one or what's their reason for having one? Let's just try to get this thing resolved and we can move on.
Gary, I appreciate what you're saying. I respectfully disagree. I think we are a bedroom community. People pay millions of dollars to live here, and I think that they want to live in a town. Keeping the village within the village is part of our mission. And to think that people don't care about the aesthetics, and
I didn't
they
say that.
do. And so I think we have to really weigh all the variables. It's not a cut and dry issue. I also think as
Say that I agree with you.
I'll clap for that. Don't pass out.
the happiest moment of my life.
I bet it is. I bet it is.
Motion to adjourn.
And I think so. We do have to sweat the details and weigh. And this is not the first time we had this discussion. It's always been the public sentiment, and we've all gotten calls. We want to do the right thing, but I do think that is very critical to this process. I also think that technology is far more advanced, and it's not just the people with the new cars. I mean, kids on bicycles. I mean, it's just people use technology to get places, and people who are not from here are going to use it even more because they're not going to want to hit or miss. So they are going to look for, a restaurant that is at a certain price point, and you get 5 hits like that. TripAdvisor is an example. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I think it's very nuanced and it's very healthy to have this conversation.
Just to clarify one thing, because you're talking about what I said, I totally care about aesthetics, completely care about aesthetics. But my point is very simple, and the point was we need to deal with the aesthetics part when it comes to these signs, not trying to figure out who needs or wants them, but deal with the aesthetics part. I challenge anybody to find one small town or city or village in this entire country that doesn't have signs of some kind identifying their businesses. We can't be the only ones that don't have them, so let's deal with it in a way that makes it as palatable as we possibly can and as aesthetically pleasing as we can.
I appreciate that there are many types of signs. They're not all monument signs. True. I think, and we had Jesse here, and he pointed out Aspen. Aspen doesn't have monument signs. They have signage on the buildings.
And they're all hanging right on the sidewalk.
They're all different.
Under them.
They're all different. So the point is, we can be creative. It doesn't have to be a monument sign. And this is part of a good, healthy process. I'm going to have Katie speak, and then Brett, and then we have Ignacio Segurola, who's been patiently waiting.
I just wanted to say one of the things that we were looking at was not just to address monument signs, but to look at our signage holistically, and that to have an opportunity to actually improve the visual with some uniform signage. And I really liked Mario's idea of carrying this sign, our first sign when you hit the village. So I would say that the actual first sign is that really ugly one in Dade County that's from 1960 or something with the moon and the wood.
That's with the termite damage?
Yes. However, I think we should have a discussion even about the fonts that's on the buildings, and that all of this is important, and if we can have some uniformity and consistency that's classy, then it can add to the aesthetic. And even if our buildings aren't that good looking, if we have nice signs, it looks better. So I think that's important, and I think this is more of a global issue. And I also think whatever we do, we need to enforce it, because we come with these discussions and we make these rules, and if we're not enforcing them, it's irrelevant. So let's come to a consensus and then follow through.
Brett. I agree completely.
I agree also. So, I agree with what Mike said as well about the uniformity. What Betty also came up and spoke about. I think that the size of the monument size, just going back to monument signs, the size of it for me, 24 square feet is too large. If we do look at doing signs on the streets, I'm not a big fan of monument signs. I am more of a fan of a pedestrian, pro-pedestrian, and moving towards that direction. Unfortunately, the designs of the buildings and the commercial that we have are set up for having monument signs because they're pushed back. They have the automobiles in front. They're not up against the street. If they were up against the street, this conversation would not even be happening right now. It's a very easy decision. But it's the fact that they're pushed back so far away from the street is creating this necessity to have it. So as I drive down Crandon, there's two things. One is the square foot of the sign, and the other one I think is maybe even more important is the height of the sign. So when I drive down Crandon, I was looking at the signs that we do have, and Citibank sign is actually very low. And I found that what's very important to balance this idea of that the automobiles can see and find their ways, but at the same time it's not intrusive against the pedestrian, is the fact that it's low enough that you can see over it. And in this ordinance that's being proposed, or at least in the recommendations, it's looking at a maximum height of 6 feet, which I think is completely incorrect. I think it has to be maybe below 4 feet. And that way that when people are walking, they can see over it, and these signs are not so big. The T-Mobile, when you come into Crandon, you see the Citibank and you see the T-Mobile, it's a huge difference between those two. And it's not the width. And even the size might even be very close to being very similar. It's the height that makes a huge difference because you can't see over the T-Mobile. But the Citibank, you really don't notice it that much because your vision is going over it. But you do see it as you're driving, but it's not so strong. So if we do look at this and start considering actually putting these on the street, I would be more inclined to being very careful about the height of it as well. I think it's very important to consider.
Thank you very much. Ignacio Segurola.
Good evening, Ignacio Segurola, 81 Ocean Drive. I think all the speakers before me summarized everything pretty well. There just was a couple of things I wanted to add, specifically answering the question of why should every commercial property be allowed a monument sign. If my memory serves me correct, in the advocacy committee, one of the first discussions that we had, and Mario came by and spoke, was that as you're driving down the street, your cone of vision, if you want to call it, you can scan easily the side of the road for a monument sign, as opposed to craning your neck, losing sight of what's ahead of you, and looking in the back to see what store is in whatever place. So I think that's one of the reasons that we agreed in the advocacy committee that monument signs were a good idea. Like Mike said, we're not forcing people to have one. It's just if you're going to have it, then kicks in the regulations of height and size and all that. The other thing that I wanted to add that I believe Mike touched upon too is that as a representative of the condos would ask to be excluded completely from this, just because that's a whole different situation and nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for sake of people who are watching currently and will be watching, Theo Holloway brought in a sign, and if you'd like to explain what it is that the current proposed sign?
It is based on the recommendation from the administration. It's no longer than 6 feet, and it's 24 square feet. So I just wanted to give you a visual representation of what, unfortunately, the administration is advocating or
It's worse than that because the height is.
Yeah, the height would be at 6 feet. Yeah. So you got to hold it up, and it's a much difference.
Yeah.
That's not going to fly.
So, if we're going to talk about some sort of middle ground, I think it's important to put into context.
Thank you.
That if this is the starting point and you got to meet somewhere in the middle, my position is no signage, because the alternative is if you come down a little bit in this, you're still going to end up with, what is it? how many more signs? 15 more signs?
None of us are talking about a sign.
34 more signs that we don't currently have, even if it's half this size. So at some point, you're going to have so many signs that you may not even be able to see them. Just something, I wanted to give that as a visual
Well,
representation.
first, Theo, that includes 34 includes the, none of us are advocating for something like that. I mean, I'm not, Betty's not.
The administration proposed it.
That's what they proposed based on the old sign ordinance.
But I have,
We could bring that down.
10
We
commercial,
could take a third of that, I think.
26
and make it-
residential, 2 office.
I have to say, Betty's proposal that there actually be some kind of mock-up is well taken, given what we're seeing right now. I'm not 100% on board with monument signs. I do think it would change the character of Crandon Boulevard. I would like to see, I understand the need for signage and for promoting, you know, being able to promote our different plazas and businesses. I'm hoping for more creativity, just putting it out there.
May I, one thing, is Betty here? Yeah. And also Mario. One thing I think we have consensus on, guys, is we mean to deal with this and not delay. We mean to, as Katie suggested, deal with this comprehensively. I think in our numerous discussions by this point, we've come to some obvious points of agreement, and we've come to some obvious points of controversy. But I don't think it's controversial about trying to embrace an amendment to this, to our signage ordinance comprehensively now. So I just wanted to say, I mean to get on with this, and I think you all do too.
I think we all do. I also think that we're hearing a lot about enforcing what we actually have once it's adopted, that having laws on the books, if they're unenforced, they're absolutely worthless, and it's not what we want to do as a legislating body. I would also invite, just as an aside, Sergio, any other ordinances you know about that are not being enforced, bring them to our attention, okay? We would really appreciate that.
And just the last thing for the sensibility of some of the speakers tonight, my personal view is I'm not starting with staff recommendation. I don't think that's where we want to go. I appreciate staff's recommendation. I appreciate the homework they did, but the suggestions are not where I am.
That's half size?
We weren't going to show this because way too big still, and this is half.
Yeah, and we can set height regulations and width regulations at the same time.
Yeah.
That way it can't be more than this and can't be higher than that.
And the other thing is, and I do think the uniform lettering, we're not going to want, you know, commercial logos and what have you.
You don't like that
then,
lettering?
Right.
No, I don't want, I don't want marketing logos. I think that's not in character with our community.
It's the same conversation we've had for years about branded architecture.
Yeah.
That is not where we want to go, in my opinion. So materials, font, size,
How can we
locations.
get someone to present an idea to us without, you know,
We can
of
hire
some
one,
uniformity?
I think I liked what Mario, we had a meeting last week and had an idea of trying to do some mock-ups. I don't know, Mario, whether you have the ability to.
I mean, certainly 240 Crandon, considering its situation, would happily volunteer to be the site where we could put up mock-ups to try to start figuring out what could work.
We need to do some landscaping too.
Sure, but at the same time, we don't want to get rid of all the landscaping, do we? You know, landscaping is generally a good thing.
Mario, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The condominiums right now are under the same ordinance where they're not allowed to put up a monument sign right now.
Correct.
So if we decided to deal with commercial only, would we be leaving the condos in the same ordinance that they're in right now and only allow commercial to be the ones that could add the new monument signs? Or is what we're going to make this change is going to trigger everybody down so all condominiums can put it up as well?
If I can, I'll tell you, communities do things where they have the institutional signs that are, for example, Coral Gables. You see condo signs, you see hospital signs, you see park signs, and the business commercial is regulated very differently.
Well, I was just asking that because there was maybe 2 times that I heard that to treat the condominium separately, but that means they're going to stay in the, we're not allowed to have signs, and we're only going to be allowing commercial to be allowed.
Grandfather
we
them.
would have to
We
clean that
grandfather,
up.
We
yeah.
need to
Yeah.
look at all
So they
of
want
this.
to be treated. I'm just, what they came to us is what the condos want to be separate. Don't deal with us right now. Deal with commercial. But at the same time, you're not going to be included into what we might be doing.
Well, the recommendation there would be don't take any action against them for the time being until you come up with a regulation.
Craft our ordinance to be commercial only.
Yeah, I know what he's saying is that technically under our law, there should be
They
no
shouldn't have
monument.
signs.
I think that there will be 2 policy decisions. Number 1 is, does the village want to permit monument signs? Number 2, do you want to eliminate the amortization period? If you eliminate the amortization period, then all those existing monument signs would be legal non-conforming. I think that's, and from what, so there would be no enforcement action to take them down. Now, if you did not address any regulations as to monument signs as it relates to the condominiums, then you're correct. They would just be frozen in time, and if one got damaged and, over a certain amount, then they couldn't come back.
So the question, one of the things that has come up is that the condos have not come out and said, we need to change the sign. It's only been the business community that's been coming and saying this. So would we grandfather basically as a possibility all the condos and just say, look, whatever you have, but you're not adding anything else. And commercials, this is how we're going to treat you because you're differently. I mean, this is something I think we're going to have to kind of think about.
Yeah, again, that's a policy decision.
And the only reason why I'm saying this is because of when Theo came up here, he said this is how many signs that this is going to trigger. But if we're only looking at commercials and only looking on Crandon Boulevard, maybe we're only limiting it to Crandon Boulevard and grandfather everybody else in. Right now, we only have 3 business. When you don't count the 2 for the gas stations, we only have 3 business monument signs out there right now. When I looked at this, it looked like it could add maybe
No, we have many more.
More than that.
3. You have SunTrust, Citibank, and the Square. Those are the only 3 business ones we have on Crandon Boulevard.
The
You have
arcade.
T-Mobile.
Okay, oh, I'm in T-Mobile. That's it. Okay, 4 on there.
Underneath
That's it.
T-Mobile, it used to
No, there are
list.
a couple more.
No, those are the only 4. Those are the only 4. I'm excluding the 2 gas stations because there's nothing we can do about that. So we only have the 4 that are there
Fargo?
illegally.
We have La Esplanade. We have.
Esplanade, we have the library, but
Okay,
it's,
and Esplanade.
Library.
Okay, 5. Only 5. I'm going up. I think it's only 5 then. Esplanade is the only other one. But library, I don't consider as a business one. That's a municipality one. There's institution ones. There's condominium. So on Crandon, we have 5. What we would do then, if we open this up, it would allow 8 more, basically, because, and I'm not sure if that's 100% correct. I'm just kind of dotting the map right now, but it looks like it could add 8 more on Crandon. So that's if we're not bringing in condominiums. Condominiums could open up many, many more that could pop up. So I think that's something that we need to kind of think about between the uses, institutions, condominiums, and the commercial properties.
and while we're thinking about that, don't forget the churches and the yacht club.
Institution. That's what I'm thinking. So,
And by the way, there is one other monument sign. It's on Mashta, and it's at a residence. It surprised me when I noticed it during my
I
jog.
just saw it too.
you mean it's like a little thing that you push into the ground or no?
There's nothing little about it in front of the house.
My hat's off to the zoning attorney who got that approved.
It's on West Mashta or
It's
South
on
Mashta?
South, it's at South Mashta where you turn the corner to head towards North Mashta. On a very large property, there is a
Very
odd-
large sign.
No.
It is the name of the house.
Welcome or well
Oh, well, that, yeah, that's.
So,
They
Not
could,
T-Mobile, is
was
it?
that permitted?
T-Mobile's out there too?
it's right at the west edge of.
it couldn't have been, it's impossible that it was permitted unless somebody missed something, because none of this is lawful. It's only a question of what we do about non-conforming use or waiver or what have you.
So how do we
So
get,
I assume somebody just installed it.
how do we get to a point where we actually
Do something?
can take some, thank you, do something. Took the words right out of my mouth. This has been a very interesting and enjoyable conversation, but 2 things came out of it to me, and I never realized it. You're spatially oriented and I'm not, Brett, and you're so correct. The height of the sign is so much more offensive than the size of the sign. And if we redesign signs, 8 could be less and not more if all of them were of the same ilk. And Katie, you hit it right on the head.
Oh, good.
We can't sit up here and design the damn signs. We have to have a design the sign contest or hire somebody to do it. But what we can do, and what we should do if we're going to move this thing forward, is at least decide the size limits of the signs so that we can give someone some direction as to coming up with a uniform design that might be informative without being obtrusive.
Well, we have to take it a step back from that, which is, are we going to allow monument signs? And if we are, what are the restrictions of those signs going to be?
Okay, so here's my take on that, and I'm just one person. Because of the way the buildings on Crandon Boulevard primarily are organized, their orientation, their location on the street, the setbacks that some of them have, especially the shopping centers, I can't envision any kind of a sign that would serve everyone's purpose if it wasn't some form of a monument sign. Because a lot of the businesses don't have the ability to put a sign on the sign of their building or a sign hanging down from their business. They're just way back too far. So some kind of a standing sign is the only thing that pretty much every one of the businesses could make use of and have it useful, I think. So the question, and maybe nobody agrees with that, but
I think you have possibly, and I don't know that I am married to a monument sign, but one or the
I
other.
would appreciate hearing that.
But I think, but one or the other. I mean, you don't need redundancy.
I don't know that we have to
but I don't know that you
decide
need.
it's going to be a monument sign if we want to ask for, I love the idea of a sign contest, because somebody may have something better, a different idea. That's
Sure.
not, before we lock them into it, has to be this size on the ground.
We may want to consider that the ones that are grandfathered in need to conform to a certain look. The ones that already exist. If
But
so,
nothing's grandfather, they're all supposed to be gone.
the
she's
ones
saying
that
if,
were
yeah.
grandfathered that currently
see.
exist, that may be it may be, we may decide that we could have a strategically nice looking monument sign and no lettering on the buildings. I mean, there are ways to look at this that are outside the box of what we're talking about. And how are we going, what is our visual of our community holistically? And how do we get there in a way that allows businesses to feel like they're represented, that actually improves the overall look, that may bring more people to them because of a general better appearance, not necessarily because a sign is designating where you're going? And how do we put that in paper and then enforce what we look at, what we're seeing? That's it.
Thank you.
Well, our next step was to do this and to listen. I guess we've listened. It is the case, it always has been, these are kind of hard issues. They're subjective. Mike talks about subjectivity. The nature of design and aesthetics is subjective. I'd like to encourage, if Mario can help, and maybe we can get some other input, draw a couple of mock-ups of what type of material, size is going to be critical, and the point about height is exactly correct. Lettering, whether it's backlit or front lit, whether it's lit at all, how it's positioned, these types of, so that we can work from something tangible.
Now, when we did our street signs, which was an exercise in aesthetics and trying to get things right, we had a local architect work on it. I don't know if he was paid by the hour or if he did it pro bono.
Volunteer.
But, I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind inviting our local architects and paying a fee, because I think that they really do a lot of work for free. They really do. So maybe,
if Tom was interested, maybe to help them overcome the
Maybe a
sunken
prize,
investment on the street signs. If he could
a
contribute,
stipend, and then,
that'd be a good idea.
some kind of stipend. And then Allison suggested, which I think is a great idea, prize money if they're chosen.
We have sign designers that could help out too, if that was your direction. We could set up different sizes perhaps, based on different dimensions, different materials, and sort of have a bit of a variety in menu to look at and see what you think is appropriate.
Brett and I were going to take a field trip on zoning considerations generally. We might want to go right up and down Crandon and see, we can visualize if we ride by the properties and assume varying size of signs, whether the numerosity is really, really appropriate or not.
Is that a real word?
Yes, it is a real word.
And the other thing is the location to the sidewalk too is.
So are we going to do a
Crandon
walking
Boulevard
sunshine,
walk?
another walking sunshine meeting?
This council gives
Listen.
a whole new meaning to sunshine.
Hey, it's all about exercise. Healthy communities.
There's an opportunity also to provide businesses with grants that may offset costs of anything that we would be considering.
Yes.
And that we should work closely with, I think, the chamber to come up with solutions
Yes.
for those things too.
Yep. So, I guess my philosophy is not just to acquiesce to the merchants, but to really support the merchants, but in a manner that's consistent with our charge to worry, sweat the details about aesthetics and good design.
Next step, we need a next step, and we need to get to this.
Well, I think our next step is to have a visual. Well, let's have a roving sunshine meeting for anyone interested to get an idea of what's there. I do think inviting our, community, people in our community to bid, put up some process where if they're interested in participating and giving ideas, whether it's an architect or whether it's a really creative resident, and to submit proposals, to submit, ideas, and do a contest. I think that's a fabulous idea.
Apart from,
You ain't the only one.
but apart from design, however we get to answers on design, we're going to have some tough, simple policy decisions.
And we may not even get to the design. It depends on, but I do, having a visual will help. It may be that it's not workable, or it may be that it's what we've been missing this whole time. I don't know.
Maybe we can have, like what Betty said, we can, the Baptist was, I think, the one that kind of brought this into our attention. Maybe we can do a couple different types and sizes and stuff and kind of test it where they wanted it, and we can kind of see what it looks like.
But I think what they
works.
wanted is not what we're discussing. I feel
No.
pretty comfortable with that.
Why
Because
not?
we want a consistent sign. We don't want a Baptist-specific monument sign.
But I was under the impression that this would be, at least what I got from Mike when he was up here, is that this would give maybe the name of the building and the address, but there would be maybe one
No.
tenant on there. Is that what you're saying?
No
No
tenants.
tenants.
No
Okay.
tenants.
Oh, that's even better.
Determine its own name
No.
that it had listed.
Yes.
No.
Oh, but they could say the Baptist
They
Health
wouldn't have
Building,
the
right?
Winn-Dixie logo on that. That would just be
But they could put the Winn-Dixie building
Winn-Dixie.
plaza.
But we don't want logos. We don't want
I
logos.
just want to caution everyone, remember that with sign codes, it is First Amendment issues, and the sign code has to be content neutral. So
Okay.
we're going to have to be careful when we're preparing our changes. So-
If we accept the idea of monument signs anywhere, particularly 240, I think what we are talking about tonight is consistent or could be consistent with what 240 wants. But it may be that they want to have a pineapple on it. And so if that's something, in addition to simple specified font, numbers, and letters, that might be another thing we have to wrestle with.
But I just want to be clear. We're saying no logo on there
Yeah,
as a possibility, was
Right.
what was brought up.
yes.
but is the constituent saying that you can put a name as long as it's uniform? You can put Baptist Health on it, but it has to be uniformly written, not like a logo. I just want to be clear. It's not that it's just the name of the building with just a wayfinding, because that won't solve a lot of the business issues. And frankly, I don't even know if a lot of people would even go out of their way to build, 240 Crandon sign without having something
All to
on
be
it.
determined.
And yeah,
It's too early.
but what
I
you're
know we have to determine. I'm trying to get a little bit understanding of what they were talking about
So,
to us.
if
That's
the
why I just
property
want to be
owner,
clear.
if the property owner wants to call it the square, or the property owner wants to use their anchor tenant who
They
pays
can.
money, it's up to them.
Okay.
But it's all going to be the same font.
That's
and
what
the same
that's what
size.
we proposed. We had a group that got together and kind of threw
Okay.
around ideas. And
And
our
no
idea
logo.
as residents, and I think 240 Crandon certainly has a different idea, but
Yeah.
we would suggest that there be a number and name, and that's it.
And the
Same font,
name is
whatever whatever.
The name of the
but it's
that
allowed to
owner-
be one of the tenants' names
If that's
they
what they
want to put
choose.
it there. And it only could be one. You couldn't have
Correct.
like three of the
No,
bank's
correct.
names or
It could
something
not,
on there.
yeah, unless you ran them all together, I guess.
Okay, but that actually,
Joke.
but that
No,
actually
this
helps.
has everything.
But that will pretty much help Baptist, because if 240 decides that they want to call it the Baptist Health Plaza, that helps them. That's what they're looking for, because they just want to know
Correct.
that they're there.
That's right. That's their
So
choice.
even if they don't have to put a logo on it, even if it just said those words,
That's right.
that would help them, right?
But it would also assist, let's say you have advertising, you say we're in the 240 Pineapple building, as long as it's the name Pineapple and not the picture of the fruit.
So Esplanade would be okay, basically, as long as they would have to just reconform if they needed to.
Well,
But
yeah, I think their
T-Mobile,
font would be
SunTrust,
bigger.
Citibank would all have to
Correct.
change it, because they would have to take
Citibank
it
could
out
have
of
a
it.
sign that says,
Citibank
whatever the address is,
Plaza.
50, Citibank. could
Citibank.
be,
That's
50
fine, but they can't
Citibank.
keep it their
No,
logo.
it wouldn't be the colors in the logo.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear what
and we
was
can
coming
do
to
that.
us from that
We
group.
can,
We have to be careful.
I understand, but
I think we need to be very careful. The way that you address what you're going at, Brett, is you define sign area, but you don't dictate really what's within the box the property owner has. But you can be creative with it, but we have to be very careful.
we could
But we
dictate
can say the
color and
letters
font.
The font
and
and the
font,
color.
right?
Yes.
However, we need to be careful of those that have certain trademark protections also. So we need to be mindful of that. I'm not saying that we can't do it, but I'm just saying that we need to be very careful when it's being crafted to not run afoul of the First Amendment.
So Chad, I am,
The law on that.
Well, I mean, you could see, I mean, it's a lot, but I mean, the most recent case is the Reed versus Gilbert case, which changed a lot of the sign codes. I mean, we can circulate that opinion. It's probably better to circulate a summary of it.
Whatever opinion it is that you think you follow, is authority.
well, we don't want to run afoul of the law, so we're going to need to have that information before we make our policy decisions.
The latitudes to be in compliance with the law are greater than we think at this moment.
But that would
We're
be
not going to run afoul of the law.
Yeah, but that would be a big decision maker. If we couldn't control whether it's a logo or not, that would make a big difference in what we're deciding up here.
We can do that.
I think that when there is direction given, we can come back and tell you what is permitted under the law. I mean, the Reed versus Gilbert case changed a lot of what you can do. Much different than when we looked at the sign code in 2010.
Okay.
That case came out 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So
If I could just clarify?
Yes.
From the very beginning, as far as 240 Crandon's been concerned, what we've always proposed has been one name on that sign. Whether we say it's a tenant name or the building name, I guess there could be a little bit of distinction there, but we've always said just one name. The issue of the logo, what we proposed is the same thing that can be permitted up on a wall right now, on a wall sign, which is a 12-inch by 12-inch, logo, 144 square inches in total. Which, in my opinion, I don't think anybody's offended when they see that up on the side of the wall. I don't think it'd be necessarily offensive on the monument side. That said, it's part of what you guys are discussing, but I want to make clear sort of what we thought would be appropriate.
I appreciate it, and I think you got that variance because we thought we were helping you identify your business. I think there's a redundancy
Right.
there. It's going to be a policy decision for
Yeah.
all of Crandon.
Yeah.
With this, please, Rafa, come up, state your name and your address, and then
Hi, guys. Rafael Momene, 881 Ocean Drive, apartment 15E. I just want to say that signs are not, I mean, you guys are debating putting these little signs up, but I think it's a bad idea. Signs are ugly that are there now. You can try and make them tasteful. They're just going to look like little cookie cutter signs all the way down Crandon, no matter how nice they look or whatever. So I would advise not allowing it. We got so far by not allowing the ones that we don't allow now, and if you could get rid of those, that would be even better. People know where things are. I suppose it's hard for some people not to find things, but with Google and all these things, you find where you're going. And so I would not allow signs. If they're absolutely necessary, it's nice to have a tasteful sign, but if they're not, just get rid of them. We don't want them. They're not. Everybody on the key knows where things are. And that's it. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, do I have a motion?
Moved. Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.